Okay, so today we'll be talking about games and science education. So the two games that we're looking at are an older one of the first citizen science projects called Fold It, which sort of launched to and initially got quite an uptake in users, and then a lot of those fell off. And the paper we're looking at is trying to look at what motivates people to be involved in citizen science projects and games around citizen science. And there's certainly a lot of work done in the discussion of Fold It in terms of how much you abstract reality to make it fun and a game, and then how much of the work that you do there can you relate back to the actual science, right? And how much have you lost by gamifying it? And oh wow, yes, I'm silhouetted. And the other paper is a recent one around a game made around teaching quantum physics, and the idea of looking at how you might teach using a game. I felt that it was this was more in line with my thoughts on alignment in games, because it felt like the actions you were taking in the game were related to physics, rather than some of the other games that we've looked at where the game is just incidental to the activity. Right? So I thought that it was an interesting one to look at in terms of that trying to get closer to aligning behavior in game with what you're trying to learn. So we have the two papers being presented by students. So what are we starting with? Fold It. Right, so we're going to start with Fold It, and you've got some slides to present. Yep. Okay, so your HDMI or yeah. So turn that on, turn that around. Ah, yeah, a little bit would be nice. So there's an interesting discussion in my new position at Vic. They're not allowed to take lecture recordings from one semester into the next semester. So when you record your lectures, you have to get written permission from all the students in the course if you want to save that and have it available to the next year's student group.
Is that why they're apparently not allowed to save the AI recording?
Well, no, that's related to how Trondheim feels about AI recordings. Yes, they also there are also some staff who refuse to do any recordings of lectures, just like the AI lectures up in Trondheim are refusing to record them because they're so. It is something that when we're recording, and we're recording here and streaming, one of the fears lecturers have, and they have this fear around, it was up there. Okay. One of the fears that lecturers have, and this is also related to games, is if you give people other ways of engaging with the lecture, if you give people other ways of engaging with the lecture, then they don't turn up. Right? So if I give you stream videos, then you don't turn up. If I give you a game to play and say, play this game, then you don't come to class and you don't interact with other people and you don't interact with me as a lecturer. You just play the game, you defeat the game, go, yay, I've won the course. And so there's this fear that what we need to do is we need to make you guys turn up. And if we give you ways of not turning up, then you'll opt for the easy option and not show up. And so basically what it suggests is that, you know, I feel that's true if what you provide is the sum of the value, right? So there are some lecturers who don't interact with their students at all, who aren't interested in talking to the students or interacting with them, and so watching their stream probably is equivalent to being in the class because they're just reading the slides all the time anyway. So I think it relates to like where the value is, and And so yeah, I err on the side of recording stuff and streaming stuff because I still think that there's value to be had by showing up. Right, okay, so technical things done, and so Fold It.
Yep.
Oh, just before we start,
Okay.
who went online and played Fold It? Or downloaded Fold It and...
Did you ask who had not played it?
Who played it?
Who played it?
Okay, not many.
Okay.
You should really go and play Fold It. It is a seminal work in the serious games area.
But download it, don't play it online because then you have the exception error.
Yeah, so download it and play it on your machine. Yeah, okay.
So this paper is quite different from the other papers. It looks more into just the motivations for why the active players are playing the game. It is not measuring any effects of the game and not comparing the game to any other games. It's just looking at what motivates the active players. So Fold It is an online citizen science game. It requires that people participate and volunteer to play the game. And an important part of that is motivation for people to participate. So that's why this article is talking about that. The purpose of the game is that they attempt to predict the structure of a protein by utilizing people's puzzle skills and trying to form the perfect protein. So, and in order to cure diseases, and one of the breakthroughs was that a scientist worked with a protein that was supposed to I'm not sure if it was supposed to cure, but make some kind of breakthrough in the HIV virus. And they have worked for it for many years, but when they gather a team and to play Fold It, they only used 3 weeks to crack the code and form the perfect protein. So, because the paper is not really focusing that much on the game elements and the game itself, I will just show you the game before I talk more about the paper. Here is one of the introduction levels.
Oh, you need to put it on the screen.
Oh. Of these introduction levels you get hints to how you use different tools. You are supposed to reach a certain score to fold the perfect protein, and there are different things that determine the score, like for instance these are called sheets which have hydrogen bonds between them. So you need to align them so the hydrogen bonds are created. The different things that is sticking out here is something that is called an end chain, and there are amino acids, and the blue and the orange amino acids have different functions. The blue ones are supposed to point out of the protein, and it's supposed to be in contact with water, and the orange ones are supposed to be packed into the protein and protected from water. So that's one of the things that is giving you a score, that you are keeping all the orange ones towards the center of the protein, and the blue ones outwards. So in this I need to align. You can freeze all of the the things you want, so it doesn't move. And here in this level, I should align this sheet to the other sheets like this to create the hydrogen bonds. Let's see, yeah, something like that. It's quite difficult. When I play this game, there we go. A lot of times I'm supposed to reach a score of 9,500, but often I get like 9,490 and I can't get further. I just make small adjustments and I just can't seem to make the 10 last points, and it's really frustrating.
It does have the jiggle function.
Yeah,
and
it
you use that as well. But
yeah,
yeah.
you have the shake one that
Yes.
automatically arrange the different end chains towards the center or outwards, and you got the wiggle function, which makes the last adjustments, so you don't have to do like tiny adjustments. You just make do. Like when I drag this down here, if I click wiggle, it will. Nope, that fucked it up. There we go. And then I get, yeah. And I can also use like rubber bonds between them to attract them together, and that will happen when I press wiggle. These are some of the things that affect the score towards creating a perfect protein. And you can, the wiggle is working on everything in the system, but you can also right click on each individual and wiggle each component, and you can turn them around, twist them around. You can remix the whole setting, so you get a new structure. Yeah, and it gets just more and more complicated as you get more tools. And I didn't get to finish the tutorial, and it says in the paper that he played it for 2 weeks and he didn't finish. I think he finished 30 of the puzzles in the tutorial. So did I close it? Yeah, so back to the paper. What happened here? Okay. So in the introduction they are mentioning previous works and similar concepts. They are talking about like the SETI, I don't know, SETI project, yeah, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is a distributed computing project, where instead of having a supercomputer doing the work, different participants allow the project to use their computer power to search for extraterrestrial intelligence. I had a lot of, I don't know what just happened to this slide.
If you fill it up as you go through, or?
Yeah, I can just.
Is that you?
No, I don't think so. There we go.
Okay.
Doesn't like that slide.
Is that a slide of death?
Okay.
Have you got something in the slide that kills the data projector? Because Apple had that with the strange Indian character. You guys followed that?
Wasn't it Arabic?
Arabic character, yeah. There's a buffer overflow that when the phone tried to render it, it would crash.
There we go.
Woo!
Hey. Yeah. So in the introduction, they are just talking about different citizen science games and projects. Often they are the online citizen science projects are often containing small tasks, so people can participate whenever they want, and it's really flexible. And most of them are containing a forum, so the participants can also interact with each other and communicate and collaborate, and also talk to the actual science behind the project, scientists behind the project. Previous work in similar concepts, like I mentioned, the city project. You also have the open source software. I found a app called Boink that allows you to you can download it on your phone, your tablet, your computer, and you can choose a project that you would like to allow to use your phone computer power. Or you can create your own project.
So you can volunteer your computer power to solve other people's
Yeah.
problems. Currently, there are hacks to try and get your computer to do Bitcoin mining from JavaScript. Which is one of the current distributed problems that are trying to be solved. Is how do people kind of mine coins and use your computer to do it without giving you any credit? So yeah, there are negative like consequences of having an open system like that, but it can be used for good as well.
And they're also mentioning Wikipedia, and they're talking about passive versus active, like you're having a passive role in when you're participating in distributed computing like SETI, or you can have a more active role and be more cognitive active, like in the Galaxy Zoo project, where they collect pictures from a lot of telescopes and all around the world and try to identify galaxies or planets or new things in the solar system. And they briefly mentioned just different games: Folded, Firewire, Philo, Eterna. And then they looks at all kinds of motivational aspects in both games and other contexts of participation. The contribution to a field. That's the most important, and they're always repeating that through the whole article. Contributing to a field of science. That's basically the most important.
So the most important motivator for people is that they're doing science.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention the abstract because it was not
showing. Because
the abstract, they're just saying that there are 37 players participating in the study. They are doing an online survey and they are doing interviews, and they are also observing the participants while playing the game. And the main findings or motivations they found was the interest, the background interest the people have for the science was an important motivation factor. Also contribution to the science field, and intellectual challenge, and also the communication between scientists and the participants as well. It says background interest, personal enjoyment in taking part, and also you have in competitive, that also goes for Folded. You have an own playing mode where you can compete against others. Altruism, that is just that you want to help people for a greater good. So, and also express important values that are important for you. And they also, an important aspect of this paper discusses intrinsic versus extrinsic. We have discussed that before. It's basically that intrinsic is that you are actually motivated to do it yourself, that you have something you want to learn because you think it's fun, and extrinsic can be because you have some external pressure or you get rewards for doing it. Yeah. And collective identification, that's more like they're feeling like they're a part of a community and getting in with a shared goal, and that yeah. And all of these motivational factors they use to figure out if there are any similarities or difference between general citizen science projects and the games, or yeah. And then they mentioned background to fold it. I've mentioned some of it. Is there anything? Yeah, they have one of the things that is really important in Folded is the cooperation and the community and the interaction between the scientists and players, where they communicate via the project blog. It is really difficult, I mentioned, and number of players in the Folded isn't that great. It's when this paper was written, they said that there was about maybe 200 to 300 active players, and the main core group, which had been playing for years or playing for a long time, was just, I think, 20-30 players or something. So over to the methods. They had 37 participants. They did participants observing online, not actually observing them, but it's online. So they are just observing what they're writing in the comments field and how they interact with each other, and what they're struggling with and what they're asking the scientists, and contributions they make. And there were 37 that participated in the online survey, which had 28 questions, both open-ended and closed. So there were some questions about gender, where they came from, etc. And there was some, and the most questions about the game was, and how they, and about their motivation was open-ended. So they're, and in the semi-structured interview, there were actually just 10 that participated. These were done either by email or by Skype, where one did the interview by Skype. And they were asked things like, did you feel that you improved any skills, why they started playing, and why they were keep playing the game. The sampling, it was kind of a convenience sampling, what was available. They added a link to the online survey on both the forum of the game and on the login page, so all the players saw it. In the online survey, they did a content analysis, trying to find patterns or themes, as they call it, and they tried to do a statistical analysis of the data, but they didn't find any statistic validity in the data because there were so few participants. In the interviews, they did a thematic analysis, and they followed the Braun and Clark model, and they used this to find the patterns or themes within qualitative data.
So have you guys been introduced to semantic analysis in other courses? Yeah, we talked about it with you. I mean, we discussed the semantic analysis, but this is a standard methodology for semantic analysis. So.
Yeah, it was. I think it was based on psychological analysis of qualitative data.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you are going to collect qualitative data, this is the thing you should also be doing.
The observations were done by field notes and screenshots, and he argues that he used mixed method, that he used these 3 different methods to analyze data, that it can make the data set more robust to find the same patterns in each data set to make a greater or better argument. The results, participant observation, he observed that a lot of people thought it was difficult, but it wasn't new players, it was just active players. So it was, if it had been new players, it would probably have been even more observing the difficult side, but he said that he also mentioned his own experience, because he actually joined, I forgot to mention it, after a few weeks, it says, he joins one of the teams, and he also write down his own experience with the game. So he thought it was really difficult, and he found the help from the community really important when trying to learn the game. And he mentions some examples of communication between participants and scientists in the forum, where the participants actually helps improve the game, and he also observed that they are using technical language. Even though they are not scientists, they are using quite advanced language, so it's kind of infers that they are learning that they are doing some informal learning, that is learning by doing. Online survey, the main findings, as I said, 60% contribution to the field. They feel that they contribute to the science field. 1/3 of the people was motivated because of their background interests. And just to mention that I think it was 93% of the participants that had some sort of STEM background, science,
technology, engineering, and math.
Yeah. So most of them had some science background. So 10 of the people did it because had motivational reason because of intellectual challenge, and 8 was curious. They were also asked, what did you like best about Foldit? 1/3 liked the interaction with others, and 1/4 enjoyed learning learning new stuff and learning skills. The interview, the methods are really bad described, and it doesn't really go into the questions they ask. They are just sharing results, and they don't mention all of the questions, but they mention a lot of motivational factors that they found, but not what they actually asked. So community with shared goal, that they feel a part of the community, and they list some examples that someone was saying that this is my what was I saying? Folding family or something. So they were feeling a part of our community and kind of a family. And some had personal reasons, like they had experienced someone in the family or knew someone that had a disease or something that was where a protein actually could help to solve the problem, and that's the reason why they play the game. And also the common desire to help. Discussion and findings. He discusses his own experiences, as I mentioned before, and there he also mentions the STEM, that the background of the participants. He also mentioned that he didn't find any one framework to kind of find any patterns or to all this data, so he made a new framework which was based on the extrinsic and intrinsic motivations. Do you have no? And he also compares what the folded has. Yeah, and it also compares motivational reasons to other general volunteering activities. I feel like he does that throughout the whole, in every section, but and I says he, but it's a she. Community collaboration. Yeah, it just mentions all the reasons all the time, the motivational reasons. Community collaboration. He compares that compare that with the open source software or joining a social group to feel a part of the community. Altruism, contributing to a greater good, creating Wikipedia general volunteers for creating solutions to
global problems.
Yeah.
Community problems.
And the conclusion, they are not really stating anything. They are really careful with their language, and they're just saying that this may be applied, and that's kind of understandable. They have such a small sample, and they probably realize that and are not really stating anything. But they make some implications towards future distributed thinking projects, like that they may have to balance the difficulty of the game if they are supposed to have a lot of players, because in this game the level is really difficult, so a lot of players just quit before they have even finished the tutorial. But I think that's maybe the purpose of the game, to have few serious players, because it's an important. It has an important purpose. So you really want people to do it, not just because it's fun or getting points or something like that. You really want the people to contribute, and yeah. And to actually make perfect proteins, the game has to be advanced. It has to have all of these really complex features. So And it also says that it is important that the game creates a community that involves the volunteers and make them feel part of something that matters to them, and that it appeals to fans of science. So over to the critics.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I can take these first. What does the paper contribute to understanding of the field? It's kind of what I said. They are really, like I said, they are really careful about their language, and they don't really say that this is what we're contributing to. So, but they are figuring out what motivates people to participate in the games, in citizen science games. But just fold it, they are not talking about other games. So, and some ideas, like I said in the conclusion, some ideas that could be important when thinking of making a citizen science game, like the community and the difficulty, etc. And it doesn't really, I feel like they just conclude the same thing as all the other research they mentioned. They bring in all this research, and in the end they doesn't really find out anything new or breakthrough in some way. Do the result presented justify the conclusion? They had one result that was that 60% was participating because of their motivation to contribute to the science field, but that is not mentioned in the conclusions. That's maybe the other way around, because that is not mentioned in the conclusion. And this is the question is, does the result justify the conclusion of the paper? But they have a small sample.
Careful use of language so that they don't overstate.
Yeah. So, yeah. This is kind of interesting. Does the title and abstract accurately reflect the content? The title, let's see. If I go, I can bring up the. Do you have it?
Only on here. So motivation to participate in online citizen science game, a study of thought.
Yeah, I can bring it up there. Let's see. Yeah. And by reading this title, I kind of expect that they're maybe be talking a bit more about the game, rather than just what motivates the people that are currently playing the game, and looking more into like the game aspects or the game elements, or what can be done to improve the motivation to participate. But it's just what motivates the people who are already playing the game. So, and the abstract, it's good at some in some way, but it says that one thing I think is really bad here is that they are saying 37 players using an online survey, same instructor interview and participant observation. And there are actually, from the beginning it's 37 participants, but the people who actually participated in the whole survey or the whole research was just 10 people. So when they're saying 37 players using online survey, same as structure interviews and participant observation. So it seems like the 37 players are participating in the whole research. And they're mentioning the most important findings. Yeah. Well, besides that, I think it's kind of good. the results repeatable? If not, what has been left out? They say that is 28 questions in the online survey. We don't get an access to the questions, so we don't know what questions they asked. I tried to analyze the data from the results, and I found 21 different answers, but that doesn't really help. There were open-ended questions, so people could have answered anything on these questions. On the observation part, we don't know how much time he spent observing. He said that he joined the group. I don't know if he observed all the other participants, because there were 37, but he said that he joined one group. So maybe he just observed one group or 3 people, I don't know. The interview, you don't get to know a lot about the interview either, just some main topics that he discussed. And he says that he uses like thematic analysis to find patterns and stuff like that, but he never mentioned the themes that he finds, or yeah, and he says, I think I have one. Let's see. It's just really unclear. They just say themes had been identified, they were explored through the lens of relevant motivational frameworks. So it doesn't really say anything about which framework they're using in the methods chapter.
It sounds a bit like something you'd say to then go back and fix later once you decided what method you were going to use. But you needed some placeholder text. So.
Yeah. He kind of figure out what methods to use after he had collected the data. So yeah, and some game elements that he discusses is scores. He discusses that in distributed computing projects, there you can have scores for how many data sets or units you have processed on in your data, and community and the collaboration within the games. And one thing I think is problematic is that it doesn't justify why he doesn't talk about the game elements or anything. He mentions one study that compares 4 iWire players to 4 folded players, and he says that that research shows that the game format is not important. And then he doesn't really talk more about games, or and that he mentions iWire, folded, and 2 other games, Eterna and one more game, but it never compares anything or brings any questions about what could improve this game by using some sort of game element. Yep, and I also had some other critiques. I think that this research is only done by one person, it seems, and when he is observing participants, he says that this could be a bad method because you have to rely on certain observers that may have, so that you just get their opinion when they're observing others and not a general opinion. But you don't mention that he is the only one observing. He just starts talking that I joined the team. Yeah, so by having only him observing it, we just get his opinion about the interaction with the game from the participants. And he doesn't mention anything that this will be a how he would tackle the challenge of doing an online observation, where you just can observe the chat and interaction through forums and stuff. Because I was kind of thinking that he was in the group when he said that he joined the group and he was observing them, and I kind of thought that he was in the group, but then I realized, oh, it's online. He's just taking screenshots and yeah.
So,
yeah. I think that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So, questions from people who read the paper. Hopefully you will read the paper.
I have a question regarding the audio game we saw. Is it possible to play it without special background, or when you have no connection to medicine or something?
It is kind of hard, I think. I didn't really know much about protein folding when I played it, but and it was kind of frustrating to learn all these kinds of things. But the number of players playing it kind of answers that, because there are just 37 or 30 players playing it actively. So I think it's kind of hard to not have any relation to proteins or interest in the field.
And also, if you don't have knowledges, if you don't have background, so you can't improve it.
So,
this game is okay, I see pictures, I can construct a molecule or something, but I don't know the meaning of this thing in organism or something.
so what they try and do, and if you go through the tutorial, it tries to start showing you small parts of what's going on, then takes you through getting more and more complex in terms of the structures that you're folding. For the tasks, you don't need to know how to do things to contribute. You don't even need to know what the folded protein is trying to do in the real world. You're just trying to fold a protein, right? Now, one of the counter arguments to folded is that if you use the same amount of processing power, if you took all of the people who had contributed and just left their computers on doing brute force search through all the possible folding mechanisms, you would have found about the same number of folds, right? Because humans searching for something is a search space, right, of all the potential angles that every part could have. So one way is to just brute force it and just search through every possible angle and just make the computers do all the searching. Right? And that's currently the standard way of doing these sort of things with supercomputers, right? You just get clusters of supercomputers, you get clusters of GPUs, and you just point the folding problems at them and just do a brute force search of the entire space. And so initially, we thought computers weren't particularly good at this and that players might be better at it, that humans' sense of perception might be valuable because we've all got supercomputers in our heads, and so you combine our supercomputers with our computer supercomputers and all together will be much better. it's been a few years now, and supercomputers are getting better and better and better, and we're getting massively more powerful. And so the value of including humans in the loop kind of shifts from this will help us solve real problems that exist in the world, which is what the original plan was, to kind of moving more towards making people learn about what's going on so they feel like they're contributing. Okay? There's an analysis of that on recycling. Okay? So some of the recycling you do here in Norway is net negative energy, right? So what you're actually doing is costing more energy by trying to recycle the thing than just making it new, right? So recycling is actually net a bad thing to do. However, it is a gateway drug to caring. So what they've done, so I saw an analysis where it said if you can get people to recycle, they then start caring about other things about the environment. And once they're actively caring about the environment, their overall impact on the environment starts going down. Right? So it's not the recycling bit that's actually having the environmental impact. It's that it's a thing that makes you think about your environmental impact, and so long as you're trying to do a better job, you have a lower impact. They've found the same for vegetarians and meat eaters. Vegetarians are generally healthier than the average population, but they appear not to be healthier than people who care about their health. So if you take normal sort of omnivores, carnivores, people who eat meat, if you care about your health, then you are about as healthy as vegetarians. If you don't care about your health, then you're less healthy than vegetarians. But it's just that if you're vegetarian, you're usually vegetarian because you care about your health. So it's not the vegetarianism necessarily that makes you healthier, it's that you are doing things that are an indication that you care about your health.
And also that you have to think more about what you eat because you have these restrictions.
You have restrictions, so you think more, and so it's all the other actions around thinking about your health that makes you a healthier person than the general population who just don't care. But if you compare it against other people who also care about their health and are making choices and are thinking about what they eat, then that difference seems to disappear. So yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges here is when you talk about such a small group, right? And the social factors where you recruit your group on the forums and ask them about how important social factors are to them. Right? So, if I went to Huset on a Wednesday night and there were a bunch of students there and I interviewed them saying, how important is Huset to your university experience? What percentage of the students would say it's very important?
Not a big number.
Probably more than 50%. If, however, I just randomly sampled from everybody and asked them how important it is, you might find 5% of people saying it was important. And then if I sampled people who weren't going to university and saying how important was the existence of Huset in you choosing to come to the campus or choosing not to go to Gjøvik, then it might never come up as something they even thought about, right? It's just, yeah, so how you sample and who you sample is really critical for your results. And I think, yeah, the sampling here, I would say, is potentially the biggest problem here, is that it's sampling existing players. Now, you will always have problems getting good representative samples, right? It is one of the biggest problems in science, is getting representative samples. Any polling voters or any of those sort of things, how do you get a representative sample? And so this is an example of getting a poor representative sample. The game is an abstraction of folding. So I don't know if they mention it in the paper, but in New Zealand and the UK, thalidomide babies. Did you guys have thalidomide issues in Norway? I can't remember. I think I checked this last year. Do you know what thalidomide is?
No.
Okay. Well,
maybe in Norwegian, but
that
I'm not
doesn't
sure
help me terribly. So thalidomide, if you look up thalidomide, you'll find that it was a painkiller that they gave to pregnant women. That then meant their in the early stage of pregnancy, and it meant your limbs didn't develop on the babies. So a whole bunch of babies born without arms and legs, which was a problem. And initially they didn't realize it was the drug until they found out the correlation. But the problem was that when they did the testing, they did it on a right-hand fold of the drug, because the drug, when they created it in the lab, only generated the right-hand fold. When they moved to full production, it generated a left-hand fold and a right-hand fold. The left-hand fold version of the drug caused the abnormalities in babies. So it went through all the testing, everything was fine with the testing, but when they went into production, they got a different protein fold, and the protein fold, creates massively damaged babies. And so it was one of the big early drug scares, particularly around pregnant women, which is partly why now we never give any drugs to pregnant women, because we go, oh my god, we don't know what effect it's going to have. Right? So you'll see, don't take this as you're pregnant. Well, I'm assuming you guys, most of the guys here haven't had that problem. And unless you've had children, you probably haven't noticed you're not looking. So yeah, it is sampling is a problem. Protein folding is a relevant issue, right? It has got a lot of, certainly in neuroscience and in drug treatments, the way in which things fold. And even in some of the neurodegenerative diseases, they look at the way cysts form in Alzheimer's and the plaques form are to do with protein folding, right? So there are a whole bunch of issues that are relevant for folding of proteins. Any other concerns or interest in this paper?
I thought it was interesting to see another sample methods being used and other research methods rather than the quantitative statistics analysis of as a result.
Yes. And
it's also interesting to see the more qualitative open questions and dive deeper into the participants, what I think.
Yeah, so this is a challenge, and so this is the slightly more on the social sciences end of saying, well, actually, we can get more out of actually understanding people than just trying to turn them into numbers, right? So rather, because you'll see a lot of the Likert scale, just give me a number so I can just do some numbers on the numbers that you are, right? And I don't know if you guys are used to filling in surveys, but I often, when I'm given a choice, there will be occasion where I say, I can't fill this in as a number. So one of the ones we classically had at Otago was how much has the lecturer increased your motivation in the area? No? So this was in when I was teaching my game design course at Otago, and it was how much has the lecturer increased your interest in the area? And one of my students said to me afterwards, I had to give you a 1 out of 5 on that because it was a summer school course and they were studying in another part of the country. They came to Dunedin just to do my course because they wanted to do game design their entire life, and so no, I had no effect on their motivation to do game design. And he said, it's not a reflection on you, it's just, it was already maxed out, it's a ceiling effect. So, that number isn't representative. When you get a 3 out of 5 for increasing motivation, what does it mean? And you get the same for when sometimes when you ask a question, it's kind of none of these make sense, or pick one of these that's most important to you, and it's kind of, well, either none of them are or all of them are. So yeah, the digging in, I think, can be very useful to try and extract more detail about what people are thinking. And if you guys are doing user surveys or testing with smaller numbers of people as well, then these qualitative and analysis tools can get you some things you can then talk about scientifically. Now, iWire is also a very interesting environment. I've chatted with one of the lead producers for that. She's a very nice lady. And yeah, I was tossing between iWire. iWire also has online. iWire is you're doing a 2D game to trace through neurons in a rat's retina. So they take the rat's retina, they take a wee part of it, they slice it, they scan it, and just like you would if you've got a tree and you cut it up, you'd see all the cells. So you can see all the neurons and you can see them branching and connecting to each other. And iWire is you're trying to reconstruct the entire mesh of all the neurons, right? Because basically, every time you guys have been shown a neuron, you'll see like a neuron, you see it branching out, and there'll be a thing coming in and another thing branching out. When you see TV programs, they show you neurons with these links to other neurons, and it's all, they show you a lot of open space, right? There is no open space in your head, right? It is all mushed together. So every neuron is like wound up over top of every other neuron, and they're all mushed together in a solid packed state.
Makes sense. Otherwise, it would be a waste of space.
A massive waste of space, yes. So actually, in reality, it's much harder to understand the structure than they show you in the pretty pictures, right? And so it's a really interesting, challenging job. So that's what iWire does, which is also a neuroscience one. Right, okay, we'll take a break and we'll come back and talk about quantum mechanics. Okay. So take a break and stand up and walk around.
So just managed thought that it was randomly as they were the Nobel Prize.
Yep.
So it seems the first meltdown and Spectre bugs episode showing up. Or not directly bugs, but I'm currently no, not exploits either, but like I'm currently trying to boot my Jupyter.
We didn't get to.
Oh.
Because apparently the new GTC version, which has the meltdown Spectre
Patches, yep.
yeah, that was updated after the new kernel version was compiled. So it didn't compile the new kernel version with enabled, and suddenly then my NVIDIA drivers isn't working anymore. And apparently it is, luckily it is a known issue. It was like posted on the 22nd. People were like, we're having this trouble. So at least it's not just me. It's fun to work with. I've spent 2 hours trying to like figure out what the fuck I was just being tossed back to the login screen.
You got there in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not
Oh,
finished
no,
yet. But I
including
think
it, but
I found the solution.
you're now fighting the solution.
Yeah. But that's obviously the cool thing with working on Linux is that while I can't get in through the graphical user interface, I can still get access to all my files through the terminal. So I'm thinking that before I start continuing to fix this issue, I'll just go in there and make sure that everything that's online repository is pushed, just so that everything's backed up. Which is at least better than just having your PC bricked and then I have backups.
I hope I have backups. Yeah. Yeah, no, it can be quite stressful.
ikke så framfor det, så da må du lage litt mer generelle kategorier, kanskje.
Right.
Do we have HTML?
Yes. The other one is HTML.
I have a problem. I don't know how to see the nodes on this screen.
When you go to
Or anyone know how to see the notes while doing the presentation in Mac?
You just need to choose the variant.
I think it should just go up when you start viewing it. Or
Yeah, we're looking for showing the presenter notes in, I'm just looking for where it is, the settings, there'll be a box where you just click that shows it on the side, because when we go play, it's doing that. Could it be that normally what happens is I do that, but if you go to screens, where is your screen? Tell it to rather than mirror, tell it to extend. Yes, please. Arrangement. So take off mirror. Right, and now when you present. So now try present. There and there. Yeah. Right. All you guys, so we have some student projects for our Excited Learning by Construction group, which could be for summer projects. So are any of you like unemployed over summer and want some money? Potentially unemployed and would like some money and would like to stay around? Okay. I'll forward it to you guys as well. It has a short turnaround, but they're not expecting many people to submit because they've not publicised it well. But it is for the Excited project, we're looking for, one of the things we want to do is engage students more with learning activities and learning by construction, so learning by making things, and also looking at ways to support learning by construction. This idea is that you learn by making things. So one of the ideas I had thought about in the games area is actually, one of the things we do in first year is we have students make board games, and they learn to make games by doing board games. But but there could be projects around learning, or like constructing a framework for building things and giving feedback. Could be do with linking with 3D printing, so when you make your board game, you've got ways of 3D printing things, or so any project related to how we help students build things and learn from what they build. Right, so we're trying to find projects around that, and so we can send out the mini projects link and suggestions, and you guys have a couple of days if you're interested to write up something that and yes.
So are we supposed to come with the suggestions, or?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'll just make sure I've got the actual links plus calls for application form. So so yes, there are. Yeah, there's a couple of pages to read. I will forward those two to you guys. I'll actually put it in through an announcement in the Serious Games course. I'll just do an announcement now, and then we'll go straight to you. So create an announcement and paste. You know, one of the things I really hate about Blackboard? When I take a previous announcement and I go into it and I copy the text and I put it into a new announcement, because the editing box is in white, it records the colorization in white for that text. So when I paste it in to the new area, it suddenly has blocky white background because I copied it from the editing area within Blackboard.
Can't you just do like copy and paste without formatting?
And then it loses all of the end of lines and all of the structure and just becomes the raw text. Which is sorry. Right, so I've seen that. Right, so the next talk is and if I go down to my notes, so next talk we're talking about quantum mechanics, and a more game-like, actually a game that feels more like a game designed by a game designer, potentially. Okay.
Okay. This paper is called Particle in a Box, an experimental environment for learning introductory quantum mechanics, and it's a game about teaching quantum mechanics. The overview of the paper: first, it mentioned that students struggle to build a robust mental models of the quantum mechanics, and then he posited that games can provide an effect platform for an experiential and conceptual understanding of introductory quantum mechanics. And then he specified the expected learning objects based on a revised taxonomy of educational objectives, and these are all in the introduction part. Then he presented the design of a game. I think it's their own game, and the main part of the test is an evaluation of the game with 14 participants, and the evaluation of the game indicates that an improvement in the students' conceptual understanding of probability after playing the game. And students also reported an increasing in comfortable level with the key concepts taught in the game. This is a further introduction of the introduction. The introduction is mainly focused on the previous works on learning and teaching quantum mechanics and the supplemental educational tools used in the QM, and the relevant games in physics and the teaching in QM. And it's the main purpose of the introduction is to introduce the logical inference from the idea that learning and teaching QM is hard to use a game, to the result use a game. And in the introduction part, they claim the research questions. There are two research questions. One is, in what way can a game like Particle in a Box affect students' conceptual understanding of introductory QM? And another one is, how does students' engagement with the game related their learning performance? The preview works on learning and teaching QM is the main ideas of this part is saying quantum mechanics is important but hard to teach and learn, even in the introductory part, in the introductory level, because the traditional way of teaching the QA is focused less on the conceptual understanding of the subject. It's more focused on the mathematics part, and it requires to revise of the basic laws and assumptions from the classical mechanics, because the mechanics is different from the quantum world and the classic world. And when students learn the conception, they may use incorrect analogies and explanations when they create their mental models. So these previous works suggest that good solutions of learning introductory QM should engage students in a conceptual analysis of the system and use conceptual analysis to supplement their mathematical knowledge of the subject. And they should encourage them to challenge their existing classical preconceptions and allow them to experience, explore, and experiment with quantum systems. I feel not all the suggestions are justified by the previous work. Like the third one, actually, I feel there's no theories about the third one in the previous work, but it just came out this result. And then it introduced the previous works on supplementary educational tool. It mainly introduced two tools. One is the quantum mechanic interactive learning tutorials, and it's basically it answers the question, but with the help of the visualization tools and simulations. It covers high-level concepts which are be experienced only through mathematics, which means it can only be expressed accurately through mathematics, not through visualization tools. And this is beyond the needs of the engineering students. Another tool is a resource of animations and interactive simulations on QM concepts. This animation series contains questions and accompanied with animations to explain the conceptual understanding of the QM, and it also interactive, and you can gain points for answering them correctly. And it is not only about the particle in the books, only about this concept. It's also have many other concepts, but according to the authors, they think this works well only if the students have some familiarity about this about the quantum mechanics. And for students in engineering course, they don't have this from familiarity. Yeah. So they want to build a new tool or new game than these tools. But this part, one thing a bit annoying is that the engineering students suddenly become a standard of judgment of the previous work, and when they introduce the game particle in the books, they didn't mention this game is aimed to engineering students. But I can understand that they are aimed to introduce the introductory course of quantum mechanics, but it's not only for engineering students. It can also be to the novice who interested in this topic. And because this animation sounds like a high level version of this game, I tried to find it, but the link in this paper leads to a wrong page, so I didn't find it. Okay, yes, and then it. Oh, I skipped one. And after introduce the previous work on supplementary educational tools, it came out to the idea that games have several similarities to interactive simulations tools, and games can go one step further. So they can incorporate the pedagogical elements associated with the interactive simulations and integrate them with the motivation and fun elements which associated with the play. And then it starts to talk about the game. Not the game, it's the previous game. And what they found about the previous game is like the existing games for teaching QM are either too superficial or too complex, which means they want to design the game which are exactly suitable for teaching QM for the engineering students or on the introductory level. And it posits that games are suitable for teaching QM on the grounds of emotion and repetition. And after the previous work part, it introduced the concept of the learning objectives. They expect the game. After playing the game, the students can infer from the wave function shape to the probability of finding an electron at different points, and it can recognize the quantization of energy level for an electron and infer the relative amounts of energy and the energy it needs to transition between different levels, and it infers the changes in the wave function when the electron transitions from one energy level to another. And they are able to compare the behaviors of classic objects in the classic world with that of the quantum particle in the quantum world. Then it started to introduce their own game, and it's a single-player platformer game based on the concept of particle in the box, and it's about a virtual avatar who travels from the classic world to the quantum world, so he can experience both the mechanics in both worlds. When you start the game, first you will see the tutorials. The tutorials introduce the environment, objects, and interface in the game. And during the game, it will explain the physical principles presented in the game, like the energy and movement, energy transition, and the wave function, probability density, and energy transition in the quantum world. And it also introduced like how to play the game, what's the goal of the game. And after the tutorials, you need to solve the puzzle. What you need to do basically is you need to observe the current energy level of the particle and pick the correct energy bulb to change the energy level. And during the process, you need to predict where the particle will be based on the probability density and avoid being killed by the particle. I can play for the game for a while. This is the part of the classic world. You need to pick the energy and send it to the ball. Oh no. And this is much easier than the fold it, and it's more like a game. And after the ball have the energy, it will change the state of movement. It will open the photo to the next level.
The first time I played it, I found a bug. If you let the ball go down the portal, it crashes.
In the web page, then you get the exception error when you try to get the ball.
And this is the tutorial, and it will introduce you some principles in the game. But I feel not all the terms is well explained in the game, like the ID quantum wire. I don't know what's the meaning, and I don't know why. Because of this, I can't jump. And but most of the concepts is easy to understand, and you can.
I think it's a one-dimensional quantum wire. So that 1-D is a 1. So it's rather than ID, it's 1D. It's just their font is bad. So it's a one-dimensional quantum wire. So you can't jump it because it's got a barrier in the way, because you can't have vertical movement on a one-dimensional thing. So.
Yeah, it's annoying that you will be killed randomly at this level.
I mean, it's all about probability.
But I think it's now.
Yes, there's a probability you die. Just.
I mean, it's a high probability of you stand in a place where there's a high probability of you dying.
Yes.
This part is like, do I learn something after playing this game? Because I'm also a newbie in this topic, so I think if it is helpful for me to understand this concept, then it will have some contributions to others too. The first thing that I think is it's fun. It's like a game, and it's engaging you to play. But it's only a demo, and it's too short to grasp the concept. It's only have 2 levels now, and after you finish it, that's all. That is too short time for you to have a better understanding or have a further understanding. The most impressive concept in this game, for me, is like it's the particle measurement, and it's probability distribution, because that's a very different part from the classic world. And I now know that the particle in the quantum world is not, its position is not defined, and you need to like predict it based on the probability. And others actually faded over time. And then it starts to introduce the evaluation part. The evaluation was done with 14 undergraduate students enrolled in one course, in an engineering course that teaches introductory QM. And generally they have limited knowledge of QM, and if they be a part of the study, they can, in exchange for a homework credit, like a prize. And the method of the procedure of the evaluation. The evaluation consists of 4 sessions: the pre-test, and the play session, and the post-test session, and the focus group. In the pre-test session, they need to answer an online questionnaire, which consists of 15 multiple choice questions. And the first 2 questions are about the students' comfort level with the concept about the particle in the box. These 2 questions are not scored, and all other questions was 1 point, and with a maximum score of 13. And after completing the pretest, they need to play the game. And when they play the game, 2 observers will note what the students doing and what their laptop screens are showed, and how the students interact in the game. After the game, they need to answer the post-test. The post-test is the same with the pre-test, but with an additional 3 Likert scale questions and 3 subject questions requesting students' feedbacks on the game. And each session lasts about 20 minutes. The result came out that 12 out of 14 students scored higher in the post-test. And the data analysis is used 1-tiered Mann-Whitney U-test. It's mainly analyzed the changes in the scores between the pre-test and post-test, and its correlation with the learning objects, and the correlation about the effective response questions, like how comfortable they feel when they play the game, how hard they feel, how enjoyable they feel, to the test performance. The correlation about the changes in the score and the learning objects turns out that there are significant improvements in the understanding of the wave function and probability relationship, and energy level, energy level and wave function relationships, but there is no significant improvement in the energy level, potential profile, and the comparison between classic and quantum mechanics. In terms of the correlation between effective response questions and the performance, the test performance, it found that the comfort level had a small correlation with the scores. The helpfulness about the visualization tools in the game has a large negative correlation. I think it has a negative correlation because of the 1 is mean very helpful and 5 means very unhelpful. So it turns out a negative correlation. And the difficulty has a negligible correlation. The enjoyment has a large correlation. Then it comes the discussion part. The discussion part mainly discussed about the above results with respect to the research questions, like the two research questions mentioned before, and the learning objects. These are the learning objects, and according to the results, only these two learning objects are effectively achieved the probability of finding an electron at different points and changes in the wave function when an electron transitions from one energy level to another. It also discussed about the potential reasons and defects of the game and the taste. That, for example, why this one is effectively achieved and this one is not. And the potential reason is the potential defects is like the game mechanics did not explicitly focus on the probability density concept. So it basically means the game mechanics didn't cover all the concepts. So some concepts is well taught, some others is not. And some students try to use trial and error to figure out the right order of the light bubbles. Like they just try one, it's not correct, and they try another one because it's only have 3 1. It's not so hard to try one by one. And some elements in the game is related to other concepts, but these elements is fixed. You can't change them or operate them. So the concepts about these elements are also not very well taught. And in the questionnaires, some terms are confusing. That also have a negative effect on the results. Another discussion is how does students' engagement with the game related to their learning of the introductory quantum mechanics. This is basically repeat the results of the effective response questions, like the correlation about effective response and the test performance, only with some additional feedbacks from the focus group. It's like a further explanation, but nothing new came out in the discussion. At the end of the discussion, They also discussed a bit about the reputation. It mentioned that 6 students who finished the game earlier were allowed to play the game twice, but their average scores is not significantly improved, which suggested that replay the game only makes them feel like they learn more, but actually they didn't learn more. There are some limitations mentioned in this paper. The worst part is that there are some validity in limitations, like the small sampling size and the large standard deviations within the small sampling size in the pre and post test scores, and its lack a control group. Also, some elements in the game could cause confusing. These limitations make the results not easy to generalize to other research and cause uncertainties to the impact of the game. And in the conclusion part, they basically repeated what they said in the abstract, and then they have overall findings, they said the evaluation findings suggest that the game is effective in improving students' conceptual understanding of some QM concepts, and the limitation may have influenced the effectiveness of the game on learning. And they mentioned the students' comfortable level with the particle in box concept improved significantly after playing the game, and the study suggested that the game have the potential to be effective tools for teaching basic QM concepts. I feel that in the conclusion part, the authors are aware that the limitation in the studies, and they are not confident enough to present their conclusions. The comfortable level is the only thing they feel confident about, and was emphasized also in the abstract, but it seems this result is not so valuable. Okay, so then it's the questions of Simons. What does the paper contribute to the understanding of the field? Through this paper, we know that we know something that like the effective in wave function or probability relationship and energy level and wave function relationship is effectively taught in the game, and others not. And we know some correlation between the affective like their feelings and the test performance. There are some correlation, but I feel this paper is more focused on improving their own games. It's like they have a game and they made a test and found some defects, and they will improve their games and write another paper. It's the main purpose of this paper. And because of the paper's lack of validity, this is because the small sampling and the sample group lacks of diversity. It's all from one class, and like only 2 of them are women. And I guess this sample group is highly biased because they can exchange for homework credits. I think some students may just they just want to exchange homework credits, and they didn't think much about the questions. They just want to finish. And there are some learning effects in the process, because they before they do the post questionnaires, they have before they play the games, they already know the questions. So when they play the game, they may be super sensitive to the questions mentioned in the pretest, and it's like a control group. Because this only tested the effects of the game, but all other mediums, like the traditional lecture, may also cause the same effect. So I think the results of the paper is difficult to generalize in the field. Does the results presented justify the conclusion of the paper? Yes, because the conclusions are with uncertainties. They are not saying, they just saying something suggests something, something may cause something.
The hedging of words.
Yeah.
You do that in English quite a bit. I think you do it in Norwegian as well sometimes. Yeah.
And I feel they didn't say anything important or new in the conclusion. They just summarize the results. Does the title and abstract accurately reflect the content? I think that the title is clear, though it didn't mention anything about the serious game, but it's in the keyword list, so I think it's not a big problem. And it's a bit confusing that they use the particle in the box in the title. I think that they mean the game here, but it's also a name of the concept. So when you read the paper, read the title first time, that they may not understand that this paper is about a game. And the abstract, there are too much space for previous works. I think at least 60% of the abstract is about previous works, and only one sentence for the purpose, no methods, 2 sentences for the conclusions. Are the results repeatable? If not, what has been left out? I think the study is repeatable because most materials are accessible in the paper, except the open-ended questions for like 11 open-ended questions in the focus group. But the results may not be repeatable because, as mentioned before, it lack of
validity.
Yeah, lack of validity, and there's a large standard deviations within a small size and biased sample. And does the solutions justify the use of game elements? Actually, in this paper, not much discussion is about the game elements. They mentioned the emotion and the reputation in the introduction part, but they didn't test the effect of the, I would say 2 game elements, but I think only reputation is kind of a game elements. And they mentioned something in the future work. They said the game mechanics will be revised to encourage manipulation of game parameters for achieving the game's goal. I feel there's no logical inference of this decision. They only said that concept is not effectively taught in the game because the elements related to the concept is fixed in the game and player can't operate them. But I think there's no theory support this decision.
are theories to support that final decision. They just don't mention them. So the basic theories of the player learns what they pay attention to, and they pay attention to what they can change.
Okay.
And so if they can't change it, it's background and they ignore it. Right? Unfortunately, humans have got very good sort of on web pages of ignoring things that they've decided they can't influence. So sometimes if you put things that look like an ad on the side of your page, people will just ignore it, even if it's your own content that they're supposed to pay attention to, because they're used to that kind of a box there with different font being an ad, and so I'll just ignore it. So if in a game you get your players are trained to pay attention to things they can interact with, things you can't interact with are background, and you should ignore them. So that's part of why they want to make it interactive.
What I mean is they didn't mention it.
They don't mention it. So questions. So everybody had it should have been easy to click and have a look at the game. Did you all have a wee play of the game? Nope. But it looked more like an actual game. It was a bit more actually fun. It looked like you could actually play it as a game. Mann-Whitney. Do you all know the Mann-Whitney test versus t-test and the difference between those? Okay. So what is your approach when you come across a paper like this and it says, "Oh, we use Mann-Whitney"? What do you guys as students do?
You want the honest answer? Or
We're going with the honest answer, and then we'll go with the strategic what you should do answer later. So the honest answer, it's a stat test, they must be okay, I'll just move on.
Yeah.
Right? I trust that they're doing it right because, they're scientists and scientists are clever.
Yeah, we're learning more and more in this course that isn't really the case.
Sometimes it's not true. So do you know the difference between like the t-test and so you don't really know what a Mann-Whitney test is? You know what a t-test is? Right. What is one of the assumptions of a t-test? Right.
Just one thing.
Yep.
Can I criticize this setup right now?
Yep.
Because we are using way too much time on the presentations.
Yeah, it was too slow on both of these.
And I
We
feel
need
like
to move
it's
faster.
just for them. I think we need more focus on
The discussion at the end.
Yes.
Yeah, because the discussion is where it's interesting. So we need to move faster through the
because
presentations.
even though the room is for the rest of the day, so we could sit there and discuss for the whole day. For instance, now I need to go to meetings, so
Yes,
I'm
yeah.
stressed on this. So
Yeah, so, well, at least you'll be able to listen to some of it on the chat. But yeah, no, we do need to spend more time on the discussion and less time on the presentation. So I agree with that completely. So the presentation should be more 15, 20 minutes, not 35 minutes, 40 minutes. So yeah, we need to move faster. Not as thorough, just, yeah.
Actual article.
Yeah, and then try and get to the discussion bit just to give us the overview in the background, right? So yeah, it needs to move faster. The Mann-Whitney is actually used when you can't assume normality, right? Where you don't know if there is a normal distribution, and you might assume that there isn't. And if you've got questionnaires, particularly if you're using a Likert scale where you've got category data, then you can't assume a normal distribution and that things are evenly distributed across those categories, right? And so it starts looking at how you rank answers and the relative rankings of things rather than the absolute values of things, right? So they talk about the difference between a parametric and a non-parametric test. Now, one of the things that we want you guys to do is to be exposed to various different ways of doing these statistical analysis, because when you do your thesis and you analyze things, you've got to justify the tests that you use. So when you see someone using a Mann-Whitney, what you should do is Google it and go, what's a Mann-Whitney test? Like, why are they doing that? And also, do a t-test. Okay, no, a t-test. Could they assume normal distribution of their data? Or is it likely to be skewed, or is it likely to be some non-normal distribution? Because, and this was was a stat that I saw in a recent publication on design. It was interaction design analysis. That 80% of interaction design papers were using the wrong statistical analysis on the data they had. No? And the research paper was on, should we teach students how to do it the way everyone is doing it, or the correct statistical way of doing it? Because if you do it correctly, you can't compare yourself to other people because everyone else is doing it wrong. So often what you'll find is that people will do a student t-test, they'll do a t-test, they'll make an assumption of normal distribution, and then they'll go, like if they don't get statistical results, then they'll start saying, oh, can I get a better statistical test that actually extracts more information?
The annoying part of that as well is that I remember when I took statistics, it was always like, yeah, you got different distributions, so the Poisson distribution, for instance, and it was like, yeah, here's how you get that distribution into a normal distribution so that you can do the standard tests.
Yes.
So, you know, you're not really taught to do anything other than the t-test. You're always taught, like, how do I get it to the point where it's normally distributed, even though it isn't really, and then...
So there are some very simple and classic problems with standard tests, and I think I might have to draw on the wall over here, even though someone else has drawn on the wall, and there is. So one of the big problems, and we have this with games, and we have the potential of this, a couple of things in this particular paper that could show this. Okay, so if I had a normal distribution of performance, and I help half the students, and half the students get worse at something, right, then I could generate this as my new distribution. If you do a mean and standard deviation of this, you'll get a mean and you'll find a standard deviation number, which would be generated by something that also looked like that. Right, so if you just care about mean and standard deviation, then you can't tell the difference between a normal distribution and a binomial distribution because you've limited it down to these two numbers which don't give you the information you need. Right? And if you are doing a test to see, if I take this and I apply some function to it, some action to it, and it generates this distribution, no? I can't tell the difference by just doing a t-test if it's produced this or produced this and how much it has affected that. Right? Because I'll look at these and go, well, if these are the two means, okay, so this is within a certain standard deviation, and so I can't say anything significant about the change. Whereas if I was comparing my mean, and let's put, so the original one was there, and I've got this mean, and this mean, and this mean, this, right, given this standard deviation and this standard deviation, this is a significant difference. But because I haven't identified that there is a population of people who never benefit from it, and measure them all as a whole, I get this shape and can't use my t-test to statistically analyze things, right? So if you go, so if you don't get it out of the t-test, right, because if these two were separated far enough, then you would have one that was here and one was here, and your t-test would show very little overlap. So yay, I've got a difference, even if the difference would have, like this much more complex difference that's been created. Right? So what they say is, well, maybe you should go in and find better statistical tests. Now, the classic way of thinking about non-parametric tests, or the way, there are lots of ways of thinking about them, but you can kind of go from first principles and get to Mann-Whitney by looking at ranked order, right? And Wilcoxon signed rank is another way of doing this. Is if we rank things 1, 2, 3, and you rank them 4, 5, 6, so long as the rank order is the same between them, then that's what's significant, right? And that's partly what's going on here, is where we're talking about the rank order of things rather than the total value of things. Right? And so that's one of the differences that we've got going on, and why you do different stats when you're saying, okay, do these people rank them in the same way? Are they ordered in the same way, rather than what's the absolute value? So rather than looking at mean, you look at so I don't just add them all up and find a mean. I talk about the pairs and the ranking order of those pairs. So apart from that, there is another paper associated with these guys where they have lots of drawings of their design, trying to design characters, and they try and show how they're trying to make this game, and some of the characters in the game. In terms of an approach, I like that they're trying to make a game that uses quantum mechanics, or uses mechanics of the thing they're trying to teach as the gameplay elements, right? And I think that works quite well. So even with their limited sample set, and the
game is. I think the game is good. The game is better than paper.
Yes, the game is better than the paper, right? And one of the things also, we can be very critical of the paper, right? And still like the game, right? I can still feel that this is a good game and it should be used and it could be good, but this paper doesn't give me good enough justification for it, right? So, and that's one of the things you guys should also be thinking about. Even if you agree with a paper's position, you could still be critical of it by saying it doesn't provide evidence to support what I believe in. Maybe I believe that it's a good game, or I believe it will be educational, or I believe people will know more. If it doesn't provide me enough evidence for that, it's still not providing me evidence, right? So you shouldn't just look at these saying, I want to be critical of it because I don't agree with it. I'm critical of it even though I do agree with it. Right? And I think one of the problems they had actually in this paper was when they get people pay more, they had a ceiling effect on testing. So when you tested people, and the 6 people who played more didn't get higher scores than the people who didn't play, I think you're hitting ceiling effects. They're also not asking what I do in first year. We ask confidence. They're not asking about how confident you are in the answer, just whether you got it right or not. And I think playing multiple times might not get you to be able to answer the question more likely correctly, but you may be more confident in your answer of whether or not it's A or B, right?
Yeah, they're mentioning the paper.
Yeah, so they mention that their confidence, but they're not because their test doesn't measure how confident you are, they can't extract that. Yeah. So because they do the quality, they do interview people and they talk to the players. Okay, other comments? And I've got to go to the next meeting, but okay. So for next week we have I'll just go here, and it's on the information sheet on course information, and we'll try and make them go a bit faster because I completely agree it was too slow this time. You guys need to go faster. So it should be Anna and Miss. So
They're not here.
they've already gone. Okay.
Yeah, but Matt is my roommate. I can tell her.
Right. Yep. So they were going to do diet, bet, and weight management things. So I'll send that out. So Miss is your flatmate. Yep. And Anna is. She's absent today, but yeah. So I'll send out the announcement tonight with the papers to read. Okay. And we'll see you next week, and we'll try and I'll send a reminder to go faster through those as well.
Yeah, I will tell her.
Yeah. Okay. And any other questions?
Just a question.
Yep.
The project.
Yep. Yep.
What exactly are we doing there? Are we going to have a lecture that is going to talk any more about it, or?
So as you can see, I've kind of got I've got a gap there on the 13th, but yes, I think I need to try and certainly before Easter. So I was thinking in the next week or so to give you a lecture about that. So yeah.
About what?
About the requirements of the submission of a project around the area that you've specialised into. Right. For hand in the end of the semester. The report. Yeah. So what that looks like, and I need you guys to select whether you're going to try and implement something or test something, or just do a literary review and read further in the area, right? So you've basically got those two options, is you either, Tadia, for example, is also thinking of connecting that with the integration project, and potentially doing a serious game in the integration project, and then writing about the game aspects of it for this course, and the integration aspects for the integration course, right? So that's a perfectly acceptable way of doing a project that you then write about the game aspects in here, and the serious game analysis in here, and the integration challenges and implementation challenges in that project. So that's one way. Or you could find a small project that you wanted to work on that was something you'd like to test. Either use a game that exists and you could get to test it against our first years, and just do some tests on trying a game that exists, or if you're wanting to do something simple in Unity, or a small experiment in some kind of game, then that's good. Or if you're going to spend your time learning more about the area, then you could do a literary review of the area and write a report on that. Okay, and yeah, we've got, so after Easter, although I've initially put in, so we've got the exagaming and the propaganda game, so we've got a couple more lectures, and then we've got the PhD presentations. I'm still leaving those open, and what they might be is me giving you feedbacks on those weeks on your proposals and your presentations, and like your research area, so you can actually write up your results and just have some of those as review sessions. Okay. Great. Okay. Well, we'll see you next week.